good day to all of you. Thank you for watching Behind Me Media again, and you are watching Real Estate Reality, and we are on episode 4. And as y'all can recall, I was in discussion with Mr. Riaz and Varun. So last time we spoke about the economic impacts and the trends which is happening in 2025. So on this episode, we're going to talk a bit more on private mortgages. So with that, I would please like to introduce you to Mr. Riaz and Mr. Varun. Thank you all for joining me today on episode 4. So to continue with our discussion, as I said, when talking about private mortgages, there's a lot of things that people get into trouble with. You know, there are so many stories going about it, and they say like, yeah, I'm in trouble because of a private mortgage. What's the story behind this, and why do you think people are falling into trouble because of private mortgages? And do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
So it's a very sensitive topic and a very unspoken topic. And also, I want to make it very clear, private mortgages is an option for financing, but as long as you're the right fit for that financing. Mm-hmm. So let me talk about the perks of private mortgages. Let's say, for example, you are an investor. You want to get into the property, you want multiple properties, you don't qualify for a mortgage through traditional banks. When I say the private mortgages, this is not a B lender. So this like the client cannot qualify for a mortgage with the banks and also with the B lender. This has become a third option for them. If you're an investor, you understand the risk and you understand the revenue that comes from the investment and or whatever you have a long-term plan or cash flow management, then private mortgage is not a bad option. Mm-hmm. Or you just need to borrow some money against your home and you have a plan to pay that back, private mortgage is not a bad option. But where I feel the clients are stuck is getting as a private mortgage as an option for their home financing, but they don't have an exit plan.
Okay.
They think it's a short term, but it's not a short term. It's become a long term, and that's make a big dent in your affordability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it comes like in managing your finances overall, because you're getting debt after debt after debt. Because if you're thinking of paying the mortgage through a private loan, again, you have to think about paying the mortgage and then paying the property taxes, and also the loan you're getting, the person you're getting the loan from also. So how can people best manage this situation?
So let's say, for example, you are an investor, you need to close a property, you cannot qualify through the bank, you take a private mortgage, you know you're going to sell the property in 6 months, 1 year, you're going to flip it, you're going to walk out of it, you have an exit plan. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a short-term financing. Private mortgages are meant for most like a short-term financing, not as a long-term financing, like how you're getting a mortgage from a traditional bank. Where clients get themselves into, okay, you know what, I'll get a private mortgage, I'll be managing the payment, or I'll move it back to the bank in 6 months or 1 year. But it doesn't guarantee it. You'll be able to come out of it in 6 months or 1 year. Mm-hmm. Then what happens? Your affordability become a problem.
Right. If you could like give me an example of, you know, with values maybe, where people get into trouble because of this.
Let's talk about the positive things first. Mm-hmm. Me and Riyadh, we can talk about the client. We help them with the private mortgage. They bought a condo. They couldn't qualify for the traditional lending. They were running short-term rentals, Airbnb. The private mortgage was an option. Actually, they make money on the investment, even though they have high interest. Mm-hmm. So for that borrower, it suits their needs. And then let's talk about a family who don't have a first mortgage with the bank or have a first mortgage in the bank. They were behind on the first mortgage because they cannot keep up the payment with the rising interest rate. They go and borrow $200,000 private mortgage to keep up the mortgage on the first mortgage at high interest rate. When I say high interest rate, you're talking about 12-13%. Mm-hmm. So my first question to my borrowers are, if you're having a tough time keeping up the first mortgage at 3-4%, how are you going to keep up the payment on 12%, 13%?
Exactly.
So what is your exit plan? If they come back to me and say, you know what, we need to do some renovation, we are going to downsize it, the house is going to hit the market in 6 months, we are going to sell it, so we are in a position to pay off the first mortgage, second mortgage, then we are going to downsize it or right size it, we are going to get another property, then it's an option. If the client comes and say, oh, they don't have an exit plan, I don't recommend them. I say maybe talk to your realtor and sell the property. Don't look at the short term, look at the long term.
Right.
So it's also not for everyone.
Everyone.
You have to understand, the client should understand his profile, what the property is, what he's going in for. Now, say for example, Warren brought up the subject of one of our mutual clients who went for a private mortgage exclusive for the full value of the
Property.
75% value of the property.
Yeah.
Is done. But he bought that property to run a business in the form of Airbnb.
Right.
Now, it's an investment property. Now, in investment property, your mortgage interest is totally a write-off.
Correct. 100% right.
So, 100% write-off. So, whatever the high mortgage amount, let's say for example, on a 10% mortgage on 100,000, you're paying 10,000. On $1 million, you're paying 100,000. But that is basically equal to 0% interest because you're
Writing that off.
writing it off as a business.
Right.
So for them, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense for the same person if he's doing it on a primary home.
Correct.
So it all depends person to person. And there's another scenario which, Warren, correct me if you can, and also audience, I think you should also take legal advice, mortgage advice, and finance advice from the relevant people
Who's helping
apart from we telling you about this. Now, one of the biggest scenarios happening in the market is people who bought pre-construction 4-5 years ago at a higher rate, when they want to close their property now, the valuations are coming low. Let's say, for example, somebody bought a property for 500,000 and the valuation now coming at 450,000, 50,000 less. So the bank is not giving you that 50,000. So what is the option? One of the option is to take that on a private mortgage
Against the other home.
and then hold it for 1 year and then sell your property. Right? Now, when you do that, if you sell your property immediately, you have tax implication, plus there is a definite expense of 24,000 for
HST.
HST purposes. Right? Now, even if you borrow that 50,000, at 10%, your expenses for the year is only 5,000. But by doing that, you are saving 24,000 that's going on your taxes.
Right.
So your net gain is 19,000. So the scenario changes from person to person. Best thing is to speak to your mortgage broker, ask him the scenarios, use it if it's beneficial for you.
It's not a bad thing. That's why the lending is available. But it depends on what's your uses and what's your exit plan is. To the point where Rhea said, you can buy the condo, you're sure. But in 1 year, the value comes up, you can refinance and you can pay off the private mortgage. Or you may want to sell the property in a year from now. That's an option for the private mortgage.
Okay. So when considering the do's and don'ts, what are some things that you would advise people to do before they get a private mortgage? Is there something that they need to do their research on?
First thing is, most important thing, to sit down with your mortgage professional or your financial planner and find out what is my exit plan and how long is the exit plan. Is it going to take 1 year or is it going to take 2 years? Once you figure that out, can I keep up the payment until I exit out of this? And if you don't, then you need to really consider different options. For an example, you cannot if you cannot really come out of it in a month, in a year, you cannot pay that off. You also keep in mind, you had to renew the private mortgage after 1 year. And what about if you don't get renewed? So there's a lot of planning need to be in place, and you need to be real to yourself. That's why I always tell my client, don't just do it out of a short-term thinking, think about the long-term thinking. If you are planning to sell a house in 6 months from now, don't take a private mortgage and add more debts and more fees, then do that right now. That's why it's individually catered. You need to talk to your mortgage broker, you need to talk to your real estate agent, you need to talk to an accountant, financial planner to see what is the option I have.
Right.
So it's always for a short-term bridging, the ideal use for short-term bridging. And that person should know that if I were to take this private and become a homeowner, what is my exit plan in a year or a year and a half? Now, for example, if he knows I have absolutely no way of getting a bank mortgage at all, then going in and saying, okay, I will sort it out in a year, is the wrong way to get about.
Correct.
The 80% chance is he can't sort it out in a year. So he had to go for renewal, he had to go for extension, unless he's planning to sell or whatever. But if he's planning to sell, then definitely for him to make money, the real estate market should grow more than 10%.
Yes.
Otherwise, you lose money.
Right?
Yeah, correct.
Even the soft costs, even without realtor fees and other fees are involved. So and we always say in the last 58 years, real estate grew only by 7.1%. And then for you to expect a miracle of 10%, you're not there. So you are thinking of holding on for long and moving on to a bank. If you can't do that, think twice.
That's right. When speaking about a person who's giving the private mortgage, is there certain documentation? For example, if you're going through a bank loan, we need to show our income, we need to show our assets in order to get a loan approved. So in a private mortgage, is there something like that?
Great question. They don't look at anything. That's why it's easy to qualify. They look at the equity of the home. They usually lends up to 75% of the property value. And that's why it's also get extremely difficult when you're default on the payment. They want to take the property over.
Oh.
They don't work with you like how the
Right.
banks will.
So your property is on the risk there.
Property on the risk. They're lending on the property.
Right.
They're not lending on the covenant.
Okay.
Because the covenant is not strong. That's why they couldn't get the financing from the banks or the B lenders.
Right.
So covenant is weak, the property is strong, they're putting 25% down. So they want to act quickly if you are behind on the payments. They don't want the default rate to keep adding on. So they want to get on it to take the possession of the property.
Understood.
And when you come to private mortgages, there are good lenders. I'm not saying all the private lenders are bad. We work with a lot of amazing lenders. They don't charge a renewal fees. They don't charge additional fees. They are governed by the FISRA and the government body. So they do the right thing. So there's a lot of individual private lenders and there's institutional private lenders. For example, we arranged the mortgage for our mutual client from an institutional private lender. They're very reputable. It's not you're just going and borrowing individually. So you also need to understand who the lender is as well if you're borrowing the money.
Okay, perfect. So I think viewers, we got a pretty good idea about what the private mortgages are and what you need to be careful of before you get a private mortgage as well, and whether you have a exit plan or no. So as you all know, we are taking in public questions as well, and there are a few questions that were brought in from Mr. Riaz and Mr. Varun separately as well, based on mortgages and real estate as a whole. So we're going to touch on that, and if you have more questions, please do message us, drop them down on the comment section. Don't worry, your names or personal information will not be exposed, it will be anonymous. So coming to the first public question, I think this is a question for you, Mr. Varun.
Yep.
This person said that I am a first-time home buyer in Brampton and trying to decide between a 3-year fixed and a 5-year fixed 5-year variable rate.
Okay.
So the rates seem to be dropping, but I'm nervous about committing long-term. What should I consider before choosing? That's the question.
Perfect. So first of all, this is my opinion based on my reading and my findings. So it's not. So don't hold that against me or anyone else. So in today's market, my advice to the borrowers are take a variable rate mortgage. So we had a market update with one of the economists. The Bank of Canada prime rate is at 2.75. Their target rate is going to be 2%. So there will be rate cuts coming along the way. So that's being said, that my feedback is take a variable. When you take a variable, you always have an option to convert the variable into a fixed when the rate comes down without a prepayment charges or paying a penalty.
Okay.
So my feedback to your viewer will be take a variable rate mortgage.
Take a
Variable, 5-year
Okay.
variable rate mortgage.
and then slowly turn it into a
You can gauge the market and you have an option to convert it into a fixed.
Okay, perfect.
So, Shanala, so speaking on it, I think Varun, we have the doctor in mortgages here, so he knows best. And let me also, while he's here, use his expertise where he might be able to tell us, see, what is the advantage of a variable and what is the advantage of a fixed mortgage. For example, the people who take the mortgage, again, the purpose of taking the mortgage. So if that person individual is talking of their primary home which they are going to live forever, okay, the scenario is different whether they are taking it on a investment property. Say for example, Varun told me about few months ago that the average person in Canada breaks their mortgage in 2.2 years. Breaks the mortgage. So in other words, he cancels that, moves on to refinancing or get another mortgage or something like that. So a fixed mortgage you can't break. I think I'll leave it to the expert to explain that.
So that's a great question, Reyes. So advantage and disadvantage. First, variable rate, you need to understand your risk. You need to be able to sleep in the night. There's a lot of people went through a lot of stressful times with the increasing rates from 2022 to 2024. A lot of people are losing the sleep over. They were having a cash flow problem, being on a variable rate mortgage that we haven't seen in decades. If you talk to someone who's been a homeowner in 80s and 90s, they were well aware of it. But in my career, I haven't seen those significant the rates were prime rate were going up. So it's come to the risk tolerance. Who is the right fit for the variable and who's the right fit for the fixed? The advantage of the variable rate is if you want to break the mortgage, you only have a 3 months penalty. So it's easy to calculate the penalty. That's given the fact, say, average size of the mortgage is only 2.3 years. So if you want to sell, if you want to make a move, you want to change a lender, the penalty is very less. But you can always go from a variable to fixed without paying any penalty. So you can gauge the market. Mm-hmm. But when you take a fixed, you are committed to that 3 or 4 or 5 year term. And if the rate comes down, you need to pay a penalty to come out of it. So I'll give an example. So in 2023, 2024, rates are really high. I was advising the clients to get a variable. They converted into a 3-year fix at 6-7% instead of taking a variable. Hence, if they took a variable rate mortgage in 23, 24, they have an option to convert the variable into a fix right now, about 4%. That's a significant difference of 2% over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay.
So, but that's why I said in the beginning, it comes to the risk tolerance. What makes you sleep better in the night?
Yes.
So I think, Chanel, I'm going to play your role here. I'm going to ask Varun one more important question. Yeah, when you are breaking a fixed mortgage and there's a penalty, for that penalty, my understanding is they are not calculating the interest rate you are paying now, but they're calculating the published rate.
Posted rate.
Posted rate. So that would be the higher rate than what you are.
Correct. It's called interest rate differential. Interest rate differential calculated based on the posted rate, not the discount rate. So what happens is when the bond yield started to come, it's a reinvesting rate for the banks. So when the rate comes down, your penalty actually goes up, not the other way around. So a lot of people think that penalty is less because the rates are coming down. So if you borrow at 6%, now the fixed rate at 4%, your penalty is going to be significantly higher. If you borrow at 4%, now the rate is 6%, the penalty will be lower.
Okay. Understood. So, well, I think the time is up for episode number 4. I think we spoke about private mortgages and we touched up on one public question, but definitely on the next episodes as well, we'll be focusing more on public questions. So keep in touch. Thank you for watching. And as I said earlier, send in your questions. We will be happy to answer, especially Mr. Riaz and Varun will be answering your questions for you. And thank you for watching Real Estate Reality. We'll be back again with episode 5. Keep watching. Have a great day.
Thank you.